Welcome to the presentation on bartering in psychotherapy, social work, counseling, and marriage and family therapy. I'm Ofer Zur, a licensed psychologist, ethicist, instructor, expert witness, author, and most importantly, anthropologically critical thinker. In addition to my dozens of published articles, APA book has also published my book on boundaries in therapy, which include a whole chapter on the ethics of bartering. So, what is bartering? Bartering in psychotherapy or social work is the exchange of goods or services for psychotherapy or counseling. Bartering is as old as humankind. At the very beginning of humankind, obviously, there was no money, no gold coins, and people bartered and traded in almost all area of their lives. They traded items like food, decorative apparel, tools, and they've traded services as well. The earliest coins were founded in Mesopotamia. Now it's to be found in Iraq around 2000 BC. As it comes too cumbersome to haul around a lot of heavy coins or large items for trade, money was introduced. While money has obviously been dominant mode in modern commercial exchanges, bartering has persisted through the history of humankind. Obviously, in modern time, credit card and online transaction are becoming more and more popular, or very popular. At times of economic depression, understandably, many people, including psychotherapists and patients, seem to revert to bartering. During economic recession, people who are low on cash still possess their skill and talent, such as mechanical, graphics, web design, computer programming, farming. Patients still possess value traits, assets such as work of art, and computers, tools, and still own trade commercials such as corn and chicken. The internet actually introduced also a bartering website and kind of revitalized the bartering idea. So we have Craigslist, we have Barter Quest, we have a website called Free Cycle and TradeMade. So it's interesting kind of in this modern time that the internet is kind of paying attention to bartering. Bartering in psychotherapy, the topic of this presentation, is acceptable of services, good, or other non-monetary payment from client in return for psychological or counseling services. Unlike bartering for goods, bartering for service are almost always create dual relationship. So let's start with bartering for good. I barter with a painter client who strongly believed in bartering. He didn't want to pay me cash or checks or anything. So we barter for one of his beautiful painting in exchange for 10 sessions. So the way we come up with the 10 session was his painting was for sale in a local gallery for $1,500. My fee at the time was $150 a session. So we barter his painting for 10 therapy sessions. Just kind of a win-win for both of us. I also barter with cash poor farmer for a small bag of fruits or vegetable for each session that she brought with her. As I noted about, borrowing for good does not create dual relationship, does not create multiple relationship. In contrast, bartering for services are more complex than bartering for goods and are involved some type of dual relationship. In my long forensic expert career, I have been called to testify in licensing board and lawsuits on both sides of the fence, and clients and therapy regarding clients and therapists who were involved in bartering for services. Some of these exchanges involved simple exchange, such as well-defined dog walking for therapy. This would be bartering for services. Other bartering services arrangement are based on an hour per hour. That means 1 hour of the client's work against 1 hour session. Many other bartering arrangements that were more complex or sometimes impossible to defend were when clients served as bookkeeper, secretarial job, house cleaning, painting the house, and all this in exchange for therapy. So the complexities that involve in bartering for services is if the therapist is not satisfied with the work or the service of the clients, or when there's disagreement about the financial worth of the client's work and the therapist's work. So the next thing is to see what does the professional association code of ethics say about bartering. I know you heard in so many of your risk management workshop, don't barter, don't touch, don't exchange gift, don't. But in reality, none of the codes forbid all types of bartering. Some are more cautious than others. For example, APA, American Psychological Association, says that psychologists may barter if it's not clinically counterindicative or if the resulting arrangement is not exploitative. Very simple, and they say just do it right. AAMFT Code of Ethics talk about bartering for professional services may be conducted if supervisee or clients request it, the relationship is not exploitative, the professional relationship is not distorted, and a clean written contract is established. So they are very reasonable AAMFT. ACA, American Counseling Association, Code of Ethics states that counselors may barter if the bartering does not result in exploitation or harm, makes sense. If the client requests it, also makes perfect sense. And if such arrangements are an accepted practice among professionals in the community. So if you are coming from a remote community, from agricultural community, or special other artistic community, that's kind of more acceptable in this community. Counselors consider the cultural implication of bartering. This is such a good statement by ACA because it has to do with culture. And also discuss relevant concern with the clients about bartering and document the agreement. What do you exchange for? So this is really good. CAMFT, California Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, kind of play both sides of the net, kind of a little bit sad in my book. It says MFT ordinarily refrain from accepting goods, services, or other non-monetary remuneration from patient in return for professional services. Such arrangement, the code says, often create conflict that may lead to exploitation or distortion of professional relationship. But so they don't ban it altogether, but they also kind of say super cautious. And I'm not sure where is the data that such a thing create conflict, often create conflict. NHW also playing both sides of the net like CAMFT. It says social workers should avoid accepting goods or services from client as payment for professional services. How odd. Bartering arrangements, particularly involving services, create a potential for conflict of interest, exploitation, inappropriate boundaries in social workers in relationship to the client. It's kind of so sad. You think social workers would be the first one to embrace it. But it's also the code, NSW code also add, social workers should explore and may participate in bartering only in a very limited circumstances when it can be demonstrated that such arrangements are acceptable practice among professionals in the local community. That's a very good consideration. To be essential to the provision of services negotiated without coercion. Of course, if there shouldn't be any coercion, and entered into the client's initiative and with the client's informed consent. So, and then social worker who accept goods and services from client as a payment for professional services assume the full burden of demonstrating that this arrangement will not be detrimental to the client. Odd. NBCC doesn't even mention bartering in the Code of Ethics. How nice. But so not any Code of Ethics ban all form of bartering. This is unlike what you heard in risk management workshop and in preparation for exams or whatever it is. Bartering has been a highly controversial issue, and some frown upon bartering. It'll be Consumer Protection Agency, Licensing Board, Ethics Committee, Risk Management, of course. And the reason that they place bartering on their cautious avoidance list is because they consider the myth of power disparity or power differential between therapist and client. It's like almost all clients are just helpless, semi-psychotic or neurotic, and we therapists are always that powerful. I mean, it's kind of really when you psychotherapists going to therapy, we don't have necessarily power disparity with our therapists. We just come to help with our depression, with anxiety, with post-traumatic stress, whatever it is. Another opposing view is given by psychoanalysts because it is often involved extensive self-disclosure that is frowned by psychoanalysts. Many of the opposed professionals, so-called experts, to bartering view it as a first step on a slippery slope towards harm, exploitation, or even sexual relationship between client and therapist. This is really shockingly idiotic, sorry for the term. The literature on bartering seems to focus primarily on the potential hazard of bartering rather than how it is honoring the client and allows clients to receive mental health. So while bartering is frowned upon by experts and ethics codes, the bartering goods seem to be more acceptable in some culture. The support for bartering comes from acknowledgement that bartering may be the only way for indigenous people to get therapy when it is done as a normal aspect of agricultural, rural, or other small community. It's very common among artists. I have two friends that kind of don't believe in cash, so they do bartering everywhere, including in the therapy. Many of those who oppose bartering reluctantly acknowledge that bartering cannot and should not be always avoided, as I read to you in the Code of Ethics. And so it's important for us to, when we think about bartering, that it matches the client's needs, the client's wishes, the client's style, the client's situation, and perhaps most important, the client culture. The focus of this presentation is not risk avoidance, but it is about doing good, doing what's right with the client, which is what we are paid for. So we need to do what's most beneficial to the client. And when clients want and suggest bartering, we should be attending to that. We are not hired by our client to avoid risk. We are hired to help. The bartering environment should be documented in the clinical notes. It's important to realize that bartering can be counter-clinical in some situation with some client. Generally, we need to be cautious with borderline personality disorder clients that can really create a very complex relationship. Paranoid clients, sometimes you start bartering and they become paranoid. And some clients that see themselves primarily as victims may feel victimized even though they agreed to the bartering arrangement originally, and hopefully you documented it. Do not let fear of lawsuits, licensing board, or attorneys determine your fee agreement. Match it to the client. Culture, personality, situation. Act with competence and integrity while minimize risk by the following guideline. Remember that you are being paid as, again, to say provide help and care, not to practice risk management. Differentiate when and what types of bartering are best suitable to each and every client. Consult with clinical, ethical, or legal expert in complex cases and document the consultation. I cannot emphasize the importance. This can be fantastic defense for you in either lawsuits, which are very rare in our profession, or in licensing board. Evaluate the effectiveness and appropriateness of a bartering arrangement regularly because it may change. It's so sometimes complication or negative feelings or disagreement arise, and you need to perhaps change the bartering arrangement or drop it altogether, but discuss it with the client and get consultation and document both. So in closing, bartering for goods are generally simpler than bartering for service. Bartering, according to all code of ethics, are some are acceptable and generally is part of standard of care. And you can check my website, drzuri.com, for articles, online courses, video, audios, books on the topic of bartering and many other boundaries in therapy. You're also invited to make a comment on this YouTube entry. One of my main articles on that will be at drzuri.com/barter-therapy. Thank you so much.